A single copper piece. That was the price of a life in the grey market. Rain slicked the cobblestones of the slave pits, mixing with the filth and the metallic scent of blood. But Isolde Sterling didn't care about the smell. She cared about survival. She didn't want a lover, and she certainly didn't want a king. She just needed something big enough to scare the debt collectors away from her door. When the auctioneer kicked the motionless man with the burlap sack over his head, the crowd laughed. He was the reject, the broken thing. Isolde stepped forward, her hand trembling as she offered her last coin. She thought she was buying a bodyguard. She had no idea she had just purchased the most dangerous predator on the continent, and that he would burn the world down to keep her safe. The rain in Sector 4 didn't wash things clean, it just made the grime slicker. Isolde Sterling pulled the collar of her threadbare coat tighter around her throat, trying to ignore the biting wind that whipped through the auction yard. It was a miserable Tuesday in the grey market, a lawless strip of territory nestled between the human settlements and the shifting borders of the werewolf clans. Here, money was God, and morality was a ghost story people told their children to make them sleep better. Isolde had exactly 1 copper coin left in her pocket. It was a saint's tare, the lowest denomination of currency in the realm, usually enough for a loaf of stale bread or a ferry ride across the sludge river. Today, she hoped it was enough to buy a life. "Next up," the auctioneer bellowed. His name was Gideon Rourke, a man whose skin looked like oiled leather and who smelled perpetually of cheap cigars and cruelty. He cracked a whip against the side of the wooden platform. Lot 47, a stray, found him wandering near the border of the obsidian peaks. Doesn't talk, doesn't fight, barely eats. 2 bruisers dragged a man onto the stage. He was heavy. Isolde could see the wood planks sag under his weight. But he didn't help them. He was dead weight, his wrists bound with silver-infused iron chains that hissed when they touched his skin. He wore nothing but tattered trousers caked in mud. His torso was a map of violence. Scars crisscrossed his chest, some old and silver, others fresh and angry red. But the defining feature was the burlap sack tied roughly over his head. "What's wrong with his face?" a voice shouted from the crowd. Gideon spat on the floor. "Ugly as sin, probably. Or maybe he's got the rot. Who cares? He's big. He can lift heavy rocks until he drops. Bidding starts at 5 silver pieces." The crowd went silent. 5 silver was too much for a damaged goods male who couldn't even stand on his own. The man swayed on his knees, head bowing low, the rain soaking the burlap sack. Isolde's heart hammered against her ribs. She didn't need a worker. She needed a scarecrow. Her father, a gambler with a heart of gold and a brain of mush, had died 3 weeks ago, leaving behind a massive debt to the local crime lord, a human named Vinny the Butcher, Calzo. Vinny had given Isolde 1 month to pay up, or he'd take the payment in trade. That deadline was 3 days away. Isolde was 5'0" and possessed the fighting skills of a wet napkin. She needed someone big to stand in her doorway and look menacing when Vinny's collectors came. Just a deterrent. "No takers?" Gideon sneered. "Come on, look at the shoulders on him. Use him for parts for all I care." Silence stretched. The rain fell harder. "Fine," Gideon growled. "I'm not feeding him another night. I'll slit his throat right here and save the cage space." He pulled a serrated knife from his belt. The man in the sack didn't flinch. He didn't beg. He just kneeled there, accepting the end. That resignation broke something inside Isolde. It was the same look her father had on his face the night his heart gave out. "Wait!" Isolde's voice cracked. She pushed through a group of laughing mercenaries. She stepped up to the edge of the platform, the mud coating her boots. Gideon looked down at her, amusement dancing in his cruel eyes. "Well, look at this. Little Izzy, here to serve drinks? I want to buy him," she said, her voice trembling but her chin high. "With what?" Gideon laughed. "Your father's debt?" Isolde reached into her pocket and pulled out the saint's tear. She slammed the copper coin onto the wet wood of the stage. "1 copper. You said you were going to kill him. That's 0 profit. This is 1 profit." The crowd chuckled. It was an insult. A joke. Gideon stared at the coin, then at the knife in his hand, and finally at the hulking, silent mass of the prisoner. He shrugged. "Sold to the girl with the death wish. Get him out of my sight before I change my mind." Gideon kicked the prisoner in the ribs. "Get up, dog! You belong to the waitress now." The man didn't move. Isolde scrambled onto the stage, ignoring the jeers of the crowd. She grabbed the man's arm. His skin was burning hot, radiating a fever heat that shocked her fingertips. "Please," she whispered, leaning close to where his ear should be under the sack. "You have to get up. If you don't walk, I can't carry you. And if we stay here, we both die." For a second, nothing happened. Then a low rumble vibrated in his chest, not a growl, but a groan of immense effort. Muscles bunched under the scars. Slowly, painfully, the man rose. He towered over her. Even slumped with exhaustion, he was well over 6 feet tall. He swayed, threatening to crush her, but he found his balance. Isolde didn't let go of his arm. "Come on. Step down. 1 foot, then the other." She led him through the crowd like a child leading a blinded bear. She could feel the eyes on them, predators watching a girl and her broken toy. She didn't look back. She gripped the copper chain connecting his wrists and pulled him into the labyrinth of alleyways that led to the slums. She had paid 1 coin for a man she couldn't see. She told herself she just saved a life. She didn't know she had just changed history. Her apartment was a converted storage closet above a failing bakery. It smelled of yeast and damp wood, but it had a lock on the door, which was the only luxury Isolde could afford. Getting the man up the narrow stairs had been a nightmare. He had stumbled twice, nearly taking out the banister, his breathing ragged and wet. Now he sat on her only rug, his back against the wall, legs sprawled out. Isolde locked the door and engaged the deadbolt. She let out a breath she felt like she'd been holding for an hour. "Okay," she said, turning to him. "Rule number 1. You don't hurt me, I don't hurt you. I feed you. You look scary when bad men knock on the door. Deal?" The man said nothing. His chest heaved. Isolde approached him cautiously. "I need to take that thing off your head. I need to see if you're human or wolf." In the grey market, wolves were common, but usually they were the ones holding the leash. A wolf in chains was rare. A wolf sold for a copper was unheard of. She reached out. He didn't recoil. Her fingers found the knot of the burlap sack at the back of his neck. It was wet and tight, but she worked it loose with her fingernails. With a gentle tug, she pulled the sack away. Isolde gasped, dropping the rough fabric to the floor. He wasn't ugly. He was terrifyingly beautiful. His hair was matted with blood and mud, dark as a raven's wing, falling into his eyes. His jaw was strong, covered in a week's worth of dark stubble. A jagged cut ran from his temple down to his cheekbone, but it didn't mar his face. It gave him a dangerous edge. But it was his eyes that froze her in place. They were amber, not the soft brown of a human, but the glowing, molten gold of a wolf. And right now they were dilated, unfocused, and burning with pain. "Wolf," she whispered. He blinked, trying to focus on her face. His lips cracked as he tried to speak, but only a rasp came out. "Wah. Ter." Isolde scrambled to her small kitchenette, filling a chipped mug with tap water. She rushed back and held it to his lips. He drank greedily, water spilling down his chin and washing away streaks of dirt. "Slow down," she chided gently. "You'll get sick." He finished the cup and let his head thunk back against the wall. He looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. His nostrils flared, inhaling her scent. "Who?" he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "I'm Isolde," she said. "I bought you. Well, I paid the exit fee. I don't believe in owning people." He let out a dry, bitter laugh that turned into a cough. "Everyone owns someone." "Not here," she said firmly. She reached for the first aid kit she kept under the sink, a bottle of cheap whiskey and some clean rags. "That cut on your face is infected, and your wrists." She looked at the silver cuffs. The skin underneath was raw, burned black by the metal. Silver was poison to wolves. It blocked their healing, kept them weak, and if left too long, it would drive them mad. "I don't have the key," she said, panic rising. "Gideon didn't give me the key." The man closed his eyes. "Wolfsbane," he muttered. "In the blood." Isolde understood. They had been dosing him, keeping him sedated so he couldn't shift, couldn't fight. The silver was just the backup. The drug was the real chain. "I can clean the wounds," she said, pouring whiskey onto a rag. "But the silver has to come off. I have a hacksaw. It's for pipes. It'll take hours." "Do it," he growled through gritted teeth. Isolde spent the next 4 hours on her knees in front of the stranger. Her hands blistered as she sawed at the iron links of the cuffs. The silver inlay made the metal soft but dense. Every time the saw slipped and grazed his skin, his body seized, muscles locking up like steel cables, but he never cried out. She learned the geography of his pain, the way he held his breath when she touched his ribs, the way his eyes tracked the door every time a floorboard creaked outside. As she worked, she talked. She didn't know why, but the silence felt heavy. She told him about her father, about Vinny the butcher, about the copper coin. "You're a fool," the man said quietly, his voice gaining a fraction of strength as the night wore on. "Excuse me?" Isolde paused, the saw resting on the chain. "You spent your last coin on a dead man. You should have bought a knife." "I'm not a killer," Isolde said softly. "Then you will be a victim," he replied. His amber eyes bore into hers. "What is your name again?" "Isolde." "Izzy." "Izzy." He tested the name. It sounded foreign on his tongue, used to shouting commands, not whispering names in the dark. "I am Silas." He didn't give a last name. He didn't say, "I am Alpha Silas Blackwood, sovereign of the Obsidian Peaks, ruler of the 7 Packs." He couldn't. That man died the day his second-in-command, Kelvin Vane, slipped Wolfsbane into his wine and sold him to slavers while his pack watched, paralyzed by lies. If he told her who he was, she would run. Or worse, she would try to sell him back to his enemies for a fortune. "Just Silas?" she asked. "Just Silas?" With a final screeching snap, the chain between his wrists broke. The cuffs were still on, but his hands were free to move independently. Silas let out a deep, shuddering breath. He looked at his hands, flexing the stiff fingers. He could feel the wolf inside him, buried under layers of drug-induced fog, stirring. It was weak, a flickering candle in a storm, but it was there. He looked at the small, fragile human woman sitting in front of him. She had dark circles under her eyes, her hands were stained with grease and his blood, and she smelled like rainwater and cheap soap. She had no idea what she had just unleashed in her living room. "Thank you," he said. It was the first time in 6 months he had said those words. "Don't thank me yet," Isolde said, standing up and stretching her back. "Vinny comes on Friday. You need to be able to stand up without falling over by then." Silas looked at her legs, then up to her face. A strange protective instinct flared in his chest. Not the alpha's duty to his pack, but something primal. She had fed him. She had freed his hands. "Friday," Silas repeated. "Who is Vinny?" "A loan shark, a human." Silas's lip curled in a sneer. A human threatening his savior. The wolf inside growled, a sound that was audible this time. Isolde took a step back, eyes wide. "Don't worry, little copper," Silas said, using the nickname that popped into his head. He slowly stood up. He was still dizzy, but the freedom of his hands gave him balance. He towered over her, his shadow swallowing her whole. "By Friday," he vowed, his voice dropping to a rumble that vibrated the floorboards. "Vinny will wish he had never learned your name." But Silas had a bigger problem than a loan shark. As the wolfsbane began to metabolize out of his system, the scent hit him. It had been masked by the mud and the blood and the drugs, but now, in the close quarters of the apartment, it was undeniable. It was the scent of ozone and wildflowers. Mate? The realization hit him like a physical blow. The moon goddess, in her infinite, twisted sense of humor, had paired the Alpha King with a destitute human waitress in the slums. He couldn't claim her. Not now. He was a king without a throne, a wolf without a pack. If his enemies knew she was his mate, they wouldn't just kill her. They would use her to break him completely. He had to lie. He had to pretend she was nothing more than a means to an end. "I need food," Silas demanded, his tone hardening and masking his revelation. "Meat? Rare?" Isolde blinked at the sudden shift in his demeanor. I have some leftover ham." "Bring it." As she turned to the fridge, Silas leaned against the wall, closing his eyes. He would protect her from this Vinny. He owed her that. But once he had his strength back, he would leave. He had a kingdom to burn and a traitor to kill. There was no room for a human mate in his war. Or so he told himself. 3 days passed in a blur of fever and tension. Silas healed with terrifying speed. The smaller cuts vanished overnight. The deep gash on his face sealed into a silver scar that only added to his menacing allure. He spent the days doing push-ups on her floor, hundreds of them, sweat slicking his skin as he burned the last of the poison from his blood. Isolde worked double shifts at the bar, bringing home scraps of steak and raw hamburger meat that she pretended the cook had thrown out. She watched him warily. He was intense, silent, and occupied too much space in her tiny world. But he was also oddly domestic. One evening she came home to find the leaky faucet fixed. The next, the window that always jammed was sliding perfectly. He didn't say a word about it, and neither did she. But the tension shifted from fear to a strange, comfortable cohabitation. Then came Friday. Isolde had tried to send Silas away. "You don't have to do this," she had said that morning. "You can slip out the back. Vinny is dangerous." "You paid a coin," Silas had replied, sharpening a steak knife he had found in the drawer. "I honor the contract." Now the sun was setting, casting long, bloody shadows across the apartment floor. A heavy knock rattled the door. "Open up, Izzy. Daddy's debt is due." It was Marco, Vinny's lead enforcer, a man who enjoyed his job too much. Isolde's hands shook. She looked at Silas. He was sitting in the lone armchair, hidden in the shadows of the corner. He had pulled the hood of a large sweatshirt she had found for him over his head. "Open it," Silas said softly. Isolde unlocked the door. Marco pushed his way in, followed by 2 other thugs carrying baseball bats. Marco grinned, revealing a gold tooth. There she is. Look, boys, she's got the money ready, right? I don't have it all, Isolde stammered. I have 200. I need more time. Marco clicked his tongue. Time's up, sweetheart. Vinny said if you're short, we take collateral. Nice place. We can sell the furniture. Maybe we sell you to the brothels in Sector 5. You'd fetch a good price. One of the thugs reached out to grab Isolde's arm. Growl. It was a low, subsonic sound that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The thugs froze. You got a dog, Izzy? Marco laughed nervously. Let her go, a voice spoke from the corner. It was calm, dark, and dripped with authority. Silas stood up. He kept the hood up, but his size was undeniable. He stepped into the light. Who's the boyfriend? Marco sneered, trying to regain bravado. Listen, pal, this is business. Walk away and keep your kneecaps. You touched her, Silas said. He took a step forward. Get him, Marco yelled. The thug with the bat swung. It was a vicious blow aimed at Silas's head. Silas didn't even dodge. He caught the bat mid-swing with one hand. The wood cracked under his grip. With a casual flick of his wrist, he wrenched the bat away and backhanded the thug across the face. The man flew across the room, crashing into the kitchenette with a sickening thud. The second thug pulled a knife. Silas moved faster than human eyes could track. He closed the distance, grabbed the man's throat, and lifted him off the ground with one arm. The thug kicked helplessly, feet dangling 2 feet in the air. Leave! Silas whispered to the choking man. He tossed him onto the landing outside like a bag of trash. Marco was alone. He was trembling, reaching for a pistol in his waistband. Don't, Silas warned. His hood fell back. Marco saw the eyes, the glowing amber. Wolf, Marco gasped. You're a stray. You're nothing. Silas stepped closer, looming over the enforcer. He leaned down, his face inches from Marco's. I am not a stray. And if you ever come near this door again, if you ever look at her again, I will find you. I will peel the skin from your bones and use it to wrap my next gift to your boss. Do you understand? Marco nodded frantically, urine darkening the front of his trousers. Run! Marco ran. He scrambled over his fallen comrade and practically threw himself down the stairs. Silence returned to the apartment. Isolde was pressed against the wall, her eyes wide. She had seen violence in the grey market, but never like this. This was controlled, efficient, regal violence. Silas turned to her. The golden glow faded from his eyes, returning to a deep, warm honey. He looked at her, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? He asked. Isolde shook her head slowly. Who are you, Silas? Really? Silas looked at the open door, then at the woman who had saved him. The woman who was his mate. He couldn't lie anymore, not after showing his strength. I am someone who has been gone too long, he said heavily. And I have to go back. He walked to the window, looking toward the distant silhouette of the mountains, the obsidian peaks. My name is Silas Blackwood, he said, turning to face her. And someone has stolen my throne. Isolde gasped. Every child knew the name Blackwood, the Alpha King, the strongest wolf in the generation. The king? She whispered. I bought the king for a penny? And that penny, Silas said, walking to her and gently taking her hand, the first time he had initiated touch, bought you my protection. Forever. I have to go to the peaks, Izzy. I have to kill Kelvin Vane. You'll die alone, she said. You have no pack. You have no money. I have my claws. You need a way in, she countered, her mind racing. The borders are closed, but I know the smugglers. I know the routes. No, Silas growled. It is too dangerous. You belong to me, remember? Isolde said. a sudden fierce courage taking hold of her. "I have the receipt. You don't go anywhere without me." Silas stared at her. He should order her to stay. He should use his alpha voice to command her obedience. But looking at the fire in her eyes, he knew it was useless. She was his mate. She was as stubborn as he was. "Pack your bag, little copper," the Alpha King said, a hint of a dangerous smile playing on his lips. "We leave at dawn." Mist clung to the lowlands like a suffocating blanket, obscuring the path that wound its way toward the formidable natural border known as the Iron River. It wasn't water that flowed there, but a rushing torrent of glacial melt mixed with heavy metallic deposits from the mines upstream, turning the water a gunmetal grey that promised death to anyone foolish enough to fall in. Silas moved through the underbrush with the silence of a phantom. Even in his human form, he was an apex predator. Every twig snap, every rustle of leaves was calculated. Behind him, Isolde struggled to keep pace. Her boots were not made for hiking, and her breath came in sharp, white puffs in the freezing air. "We stop here," Silas murmured, halting abruptly. Isolde nearly walked into his back. She leaned against a mossy tree, gasping. "We've been walking for 12 hours, Silas. Are we close?" "The border is a mile ahead," Silas said, his eyes scanning the tree line. "But the bridge will be guarded. Kelvin knows I'm alive by now, or at least he suspects the assassination failed." Isolde looked at him. In the days since they left the city, he had changed. The starved, broken man in the sack was gone. In his place was a warrior slowly regaining his mass. His shoulders were broader, his jaw sharper. But the most dangerous change was in his demeanor. He was colder now, focused entirely on vengeance. "So how do we cross?" Isolde asked. "Swim?" "The current would crush you against the rocks in seconds," Silas said flatly. "We take the smuggler's cable." He led her off the main path, down a steep, muddy embankment to the river's edge. Hidden behind a cluster of boulders was a rusted iron post with a thick steel cable, stretching across the roaring grey water to the other side. A single, precarious pulley system hung from it. "I go first," Silas commanded. "I secure the other side. Then I send the pulley back for you." "And if the cable snaps?" Isolde asked, looking at the rusted metal with skepticism. "Then I die, and your debt to Vinny is your problem again," Silas said, though a flicker of amusement touched his lips. He didn't wait for an answer. He hooked his arm through the strap and launched himself. With effortless strength, he hauled himself hand over hand across the churning abyss. Isolde watched, heart in her throat, as he reached the far bank and disappeared into the trees. Minutes ticked by. The cold seeped into her bones. Had he left her? Had he decided the human was dead weight? The doubt gnawed at her. She was just a waitress. He was a king. Then the pulley jerked and came sliding back across the line, empty. Isolde took a deep breath, hooked her arm through the strap, and pushed off. Halfway across, the wind picked up. The cable swayed violently. Below her, the Iron River roared like a beast. Her grip slipped. She cried out, her legs dangling, her boots skimming the spray of the water. "Hold on!" Silas's voice boomed from the other side. The cable vibrated as he grabbed it, pulling with inhuman strength. He hauled her in like she weighed nothing. As she reached the bank, strong hands grabbed her waist and yanked her onto solid ground. She collapsed against his chest, trembling. "I've got you," he rumbled, his voice low and vibrating against her ear. "I've got you, Izzy." For a moment he didn't let go. His nose grazed her hair, inhaling her scent. The proximity was intoxicating. To a wolf, the scent of their mate was a drug, a mix of comfort and maddening desire. Isolde looked up, her eyes meeting his. The golden flecks in his irises were swirling. "Silas," she whispered. He pulled back abruptly, a mask of stone slamming down over his features. "We need to keep moving. The patrol passes in 10 minutes. The rejection stung, but Isolde nodded. She didn't know about mates or bonds. She just knew that when he touched her, the cold went away. They hiked until nightfall, setting up a small camp in a cave obscured by ivy. Silas refused to light a fire. They ate cold canned beans and stale bread. "Tell me about him," Isolde said, breaking the silence. "Kelvin." Silas stared out into the dark forest. "He was my brother, not by blood, but by bond. We fought side by side in the territorial wars. I trusted him with my life, but Kelvin always wanted what I had. Not the responsibility. He hated the paperwork, the diplomacy. He wanted the power, the submission. How did he catch you?" "He didn't catch me. He toasted me," Silas said bitterly. "It was my birthday. He poured the wine. It was laced with concentrated wolfsbane and a paralytic agent derived from pufferfish. I couldn't move. I couldn't shift. I watched as he slit the throats of my personal guard. Then he put the sack over my head and sold me to the lowest bidder. He wanted me to suffer. He wanted me to die a slave, anonymous and forgotten." He turned to Isolde, his face illuminated by a sliver of moonlight. "That is why I cannot lose, Izzy. If he stays on the throne, the pack will suffer. He rules by fear. I ruled by law." "You'll win," Isolde said simply. "How can you be so sure?" "Because he underestimated you," she said. "And because you have me." Silas looked at her, small, fragile, determined. "And what can a waitress do against an army of wolves?" Isolde smiled, a cunning glint in her eye. "Waitresses are invisible, Silas. We hear everything. We see the things people think we're too stupid to notice. Kelvin expects a warrior at his gates. He won't be looking for the girl pouring his wine." Silas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. She was right, and that terrified him, because to use her weapon, he would have to put her right in the lion's mouth. Black Hollow was a mining town nestled at the base of the Obsidian Peaks. It was a place of soot, sweat, and secrets. The town was technically under the Crown's jurisdiction, but its loyalty had always been to the highest bidder. Silas wore a heavy cloak, his face hidden. Isolde walked beside him, dressed in clothes they had stolen from a clothesline miles back, a peasant dress and a heavy shawl. "We are meeting Victor Hale," Silas briefed her in a whisper as they navigated the crowded, muddy streets. "He is the quartermaster of the Western Army. He is an old man, honorable. He holds the keys to the secret tunnels beneath the capital. If anyone can get us inside the palace walls, it's him." They found Victor's tavern, the Rusty Tankard, near the coal chutes. It was a dive bar, thick with smoke and the smell of unwashed bodies. Silas signaled the barkeep, using a specific tap on the wood counter. Two slow, one fast. The barkeep, a burly human, nodded and jerked his head toward the back room. Inside the back room, a grey-haired man sat at a table covered in maps. He looked up, his eyes widening as Silas lowered his hood. "My king," Victor breathed, falling to one knee. "I heard rumors, whispers that the slave in the market was you. I didn't dare hope." "Get up, Victor," Silas said, helping the old man rise. "There is no time for ceremony. Kelvin has the throne." "He does," Victor said grimly. "And he has turned the palace into a fortress. He has hired mercenaries, warlocks. It's a nightmare." "We need the tunnel keys," Silas said. "The ones that lead to the wine cellars." Victor hesitated. His eyes darted to the door, then back to Silas. "The keys? Yes. I have them. But they are not here. They are at the safe house. My farm, just outside of town." Isolde was watching Victor. She stood in the corner, silent, observing. She noticed the way a bead of sweat rolled down Victor's temple despite the cold room. She noticed the slight tremor in his hands. But mostly, she noticed the new gold ring on his finger. Too shiny, too expensive for a quartermaster in a failing mining town. "Let's go then," Silas said, turning to the door. "Wait," Isolde said. Silas paused. "What?" Isolde stepped forward. "We aren't going to the farm." "Izzy, we don't have time. Look at his boots," Isolde said, pointing at Victor's feet. Silas looked at. The boots were caked in red clay. "So?" Silas asked. "The soil around Black Hollow is black coal dust," Isolde said, her voice steady. "Red clay is found in the canyon, where the garrison is stationed." She turned her gaze to Victor. "You haven't been to your farm. You've been to the soldiers." Victor's face went pale. He lunged for a bell cord hanging on the wall. "Traitor!" Silas roared. Silas moved with blinding speed, intercepting Victor before he could pull the cord. He slammed the old man against the wall, his forearm pressing against Victor's throat. "Why?" Silas growled, his eyes flashing gold. "He has my daughter," Victor choked out, tears streaming down his face. "Kelvin took Serafina. He said if I saw you and didn't report it, he would send her back to me in pieces. I had no choice, Silas. I'm sorry." Silas's grip loosened slightly. Betrayal. It was always betrayal. Suddenly, the front door of the tavern exploded inward. "Surrender in the name of King Kelvin!" Soldiers poured in, not the town guard, but the elite guard, wolves in black armor. "The back!" Silas shouted, shoving Isolde toward the rear exit. They burst into the alleyway, but it was blocked. Two massive wolves, fully shifted, stood there, snarling, saliva dripping from their jaws. "Silas!" Isolde said, her voice shaking. She reached into her pocket and pulled out the only weapon she had, a small paring knife. Silas stepped in front of her. "Stay behind me. Close your eyes." "No," she said. The wolves lunged. Silas didn't shift. He didn't have time. He met the first wolf head-on, catching its open jaws with his bare hands. He roared, a sound of pure primal dominance, and twisted. The wolf yelped as he threw it into the brick wall with bone-shattering force. The second wolf attacked his flank, sinking teeth into his shoulder. Silas grunted in pain, but didn't falter. He drove his elbow back into the wolf's snout, forcing it to release, then spun and delivered a kick that sent the beast sprawling. But there were too many. More soldiers poured from the tavern. Crossbow bolts whistled through the air. One grazed Silas's thigh. "Enough!" a voice commanded. The soldiers parted. A man walked forward. He was tall, blond, and impeccably dressed in a velvet suit that looked ridiculous in the dirty alley. But his power was undeniable. It was Kelvin Vane. "Hello, brother." Kelvin smiled. "You look terrible. The slave pits clearly didn't agree with your complexion." Silas stood, breathing heavily, blood soaking his shirt. He shielded Isolde with his body. "Let her go, Kelvin. This is between us." Kelvin looked at Isolde, peering around Silas's shoulder. He laughed. "The human? The one who bought you for a copper? Oh, the poets will love this. The Alpha King and his pet." Kelvin's eyes narrowed. "Kill the girl. Bring him to the dungeon. We have a public execution to plan." "No!" Silas roared. He moved to attack, but a warlock in the back row chanted a word. Purple lightning arced from his hands, striking Silas in the chest. The Alpha King convulsed and fell to his knees, paralyzed. "Silas!" Isolde screamed. She slashed at the nearest guard with her knife, cutting his cheek, but a heavy gauntlet backhanded her. She hit the ground, dazed. The world spun. She saw them dragging Silas away. He was fighting the paralysis, his eyes locked on hers, mouthing a word. "Run!" But she couldn't run. A boot pressed down on her back. "Put her in the wagon with the livestock," Kelvin ordered dismissively as he walked away. "She can work in the kitchens until the execution. I want Silas to know she's close, but out of reach. It will break him faster." Isolde's vision faded to black. The royal kitchens were a hell of steam, noise, and shouting. Isolde had been stripped of her coat and dressed in the rough grey tunic of a scullery maid. She was assigned to the pot-scrubbing station, the lowest job in the castle. Her hands were raw, her back ached, and her heart was bleeding. It had been 2 days since the capture. Rumours flew around the kitchen like flies. "The false king is in the iron hold. The execution is at the full moon. That's tomorrow night." Isolde scrubbed a cauldron until her reflection stared back at her. She wasn't crying. She was planning. "Hey, new girl!" The head cook, a massive woman named Helga, shouted. "Stop dreaming and haul these wine casks to the upper banquet hall. The usurper, His Majesty, is hosting a dinner for the High Council tonight." Isolde nodded, keeping her head down. "Yes, chef." This was her chance. She loaded a cart with heavy barrels of vintage red wine. She pushed it through the labyrinthine corridors of the castle. She knew the layout, not because she had been here, but because Silas had described it to her during the long nights of their travel. He had described the ventilation shafts, the servant passages, the blind spots. She reached the service entrance of the banquet hall. Inside, music played. She could hear Kelvin's voice, smooth and arrogant, holding court. Isolde didn't go in. Instead, she pushed the cart into a narrow alcove near the wine cellar lift. She looked around. Empty. She pried the lid off one of the barrels. It wasn't full of wine. Earlier that day, while collecting herbs from the delivery trucks, she had stolen handfuls of nightshade and wolfsbane flowers that grew wild near the compost heap. She had crushed them into a paste. It wasn't enough to kill a room full of alphas, but it was enough to make them sick, to cause chaos. But chaos wasn't enough. She needed a key. She needed to get to the iron hold. "You there?" a guard grunted, stepping around the corner. "What are you doing?" Isolde froze. She adopted the persona she had perfected over years of waitressing, the terrified, incompetent girl. "Oh, sir." She dropped a ladle, making a loud clatter. "I'm so sorry. I was just checking the seal. Chef Helga will kill me if the wine is corked." The guard rolled his eyes. "Stupid human. Get moving." "Yes, sir. But could you help me?" She batted her eyelashes, looking pathetic. "The wheel is stuck. I can't push it." The guard sighed, his pride baited. "Move aside." He bent down to check the wheel. As he did, Isolde grabbed the heavy wine bottle she had hidden behind her back. Thwack! She brought it down on the base of his skull with every ounce of strength she possessed. The bottle didn't break, but the guard crumbled. Isolde dragged him into the alcove. Her hands were shaking violently. She searched his belt. There, a heavy ring of iron keys, and a key card for the mag locks. She took his dagger. She took the keys. She looked at the guard's unconscious form. "Sorry," she whispered, "but I have a shift to finish." She didn't go to the banquet hall. She went down past the kitchens, down past the cellars, into the damp, cold dark of the dungeons. The iron hold was designed to hold monsters. The walls were lined with silver. The air hummed with suppression wards. There were 2 guards at the main gate. Isolde couldn't fight them, but she had the waiter's greatest weapon, the assumption of servitude. She adjusted her dress, ruffled her hair to look disheveled, and grabbed a tray of leftover meat from the kitchen scraps she had saved. She walked right up to them. "Delivery for the prisoner," she squeaked. "King Kelvin says he wants the prisoner to eat well before tomorrow. Wants him strong for the show." The guards exchanged a look. One sniffed the air. You smell like fear, girl." I'm afraid," she stuttered truthfully. "He's a monster, isn't he?" The guards laughed. He was. Now he's just meat. "Go on." They opened the gate. Isolde walked into the corridor of cells. At the very end, in a cell made of glass and silver bars, sat Silas. He was chained to the wall by his neck and wrists. He was shirtless, his body covered in new wounds. His head hung low. Isolde approached the glass. "Silas," she whispered. His head snapped up. His eyes were dull, the gold fading to brown. He blinked, thinking he was hallucinating. "Is he?" "I told you," she said, tears finally spilling over as she jammed the key into the lock. "I paid a coin. I'm not leaving without my purchase." The lock clicked. The door swung open. Silas stared at her as she rushed in, fumbling with the keys to the chains around his wrists. "How?" he rasped. "I hit a guard with a bottle of Merlot," she said, frantically unlocking the cuffs. It was a 2015 vintage, a waste of good wine. The heavy chains fell. Silas caught her before she could pull away. He pulled her into his chest, burying his face in her neck. He was trembling. "You are insane," he breathed against her skin. "You are the most reckless, foolish, magnificent creature I have ever met." "Can we flirt later?" Isolde asked, her voice muffled by his chest. "We have to go." "No," Silas said, pulling back. His eyes were igniting again. The gold was returning, brighter than before. The proximity of his mate, her courage, it was feeding his wolf, breaking the suppression wards through sheer force of will. "We aren't leaving," Silas said. A dark, terrifying smile spread across his face. "The High Council is upstairs. Kelvin is upstairs." He stood up, stretching his arms, his joints popping. The power radiating off him was making the air distort. "Tonight," the Alpha King declared, "we don't run. Tonight, we dine." The banquet hall was a display of opulence. Chandeliers dripped with crystals. The tables groaned under the weight of roasted boars and exotic fruits. Kelvin sat at the head of the table, raising a goblet. "To the future," Kelvin toasted, "and to the end of the Blackwood line." The council members, a mix of sycophants and terrified pack leaders, raised their glasses. Boom! The massive double doors of the hall didn't just open, they disintegrated. Wood splinters flew like shrapnel. Silence fell over the room. Through the dust, a figure walked in. He wore tattered trousers and was covered in dungeon filth, but he wore it like royal ermine. His eyes burned like twin suns. Beside him walked a small human woman in a dirty maid's dress, holding a guard's dagger. "Silas," Kelvin whispered, his glass slipping from his fingers and shattering on the floor. "You're sitting in my chair," Silas said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried to every corner of the room. "Guards!" Kelvin screamed. "Kill him!" 12 elite guards rushed Silas. This time there was no ambush. There were no drugs. There was only the Alpha King in the presence of his mate. Silas moved like a storm. He didn't shift fully. He entered the war form, humanoid but with claws, fangs, and fur. He tore through the guards. It wasn't a fight. It was an execution. Isolde stayed back to back with a stone pillar. A guard tried to flank Silas, aiming for his exposed back. Isolde saw it. She threw the dagger. It wasn't a kill shot, but it buried itself in the guard's thigh. He stumbled. Silas spun around, saw the guard, and ripped his throat out. He looked at Isolde and winked. Kelvin stood up, his face twisting into a mask of pure rage. "I should have killed you in the womb." Kelvin shifted. He was a massive golden wolf, larger than the others but sleek, pampered. Silas shifted too. His wolf was midnight black, scarred, and radiating ancient dark power. The two kings collided in the center of the room, overturning the banquet table. Plates and food went flying. They tore at each other, a whirlwind of fur and teeth. The council watched in horror, pressing themselves against the walls. Kelvin was fast, but he had grown soft in the palace. Silas had spent weeks in hell. He had been broken and rebuilt. Silas caught Kelvin's throat in his jaws. He bit down. Kelvin whimpered, a high, pathetic sound. Silas threw him across the room. Kelvin shifted back to human form, sliding across the marble floor, bleeding heavily. He looked up, gasping. Silas stood over him, shifting back to human form. He was naked, covered in blood, terrifying and majestic. "Do it," Kelvin spat. "Kill me. Make me a martyr." Silas raised his hand, claws extended. "Wait." The voice was soft. Isolde stepped forward. The room went silent. "He doesn't get to die yet," Isolde said. She looked at the council members. "He owes money." Silas frowned, confused. "What?" Isolde pointed at Kelvin. "He sold my king for 5 silver pieces, and he sold him to a slaver." She turned to the trembling council. "That is a crime under pack law, isn't it? Trafficking an alpha?" One of the older council members nodded slowly. "It is treason, punishable by the collar." Silas smiled. It was a cruel smile. "The collar," Silas agreed. "Iron, infused with silver, blocks the wolf, keeps you human, forever." Kelvin's eyes went wide with true horror. "No, kill me! Kill me!" "No," Silas said. "You wanted power? You wanted to rule humans? Then you can live as one. In the mines, in Black Hollow." Silas turned to the room. "I am Silas Blackwood. Does anyone dispute my claim?" The council members fell to their knees as one. "Long live the king." Silas didn't look at them. He turned to Isolde. He walked to her, ignoring the blood, ignoring the crowd. He cupped her face in his large, rough hands. "You saved me," he said. "I made an investment." She smiled, though tears were streaming down her soot-stained face. "Then I suppose I have to pay you back," Silas murmured. He kissed her. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a claiming. It was a promise. And in front of the entire werewolf nobility, the Alpha King marked the human waitress as his queen. From the slave pits of the Grey Market to the throne of the Obsidian Peaks, Isolde and Silas proved that power isn't about claws or crowns. It's about loyalty. Silas got his kingdom back, but he found something far more valuable. A partner who loved the man, not the monster. And as for Kelvin, well, let's just say the mines of Black Hollow are not kind to soft hands. Thank you for listening to this epic saga. If you enjoyed this twist on the werewolf romance genre, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. What do you think? Should Isolde become a werewolf or stay human? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.